Now that we have the planning out of the way, let's start programming. First, we'll build a function to set our sights on, where we're heading towards. Let's call it print message. It takes username, badge count, and points. And let's concat it into a message that says username has badge count plus total badges. So Chalkers has badge count total badges and points in JavaScript. And let's store this as message, var message. And we can console.log message. And then end the function. So this message will say Chalkers has X total of badges with Y amount of points in JavaScript. And let's check if this works. So I'm going to just put it down here for now. Print message, Chalkers, and then let's say 1,000 points. Let's say 2 million points in JavaScript. And let's open up the console and just type node app.js. And it says Chalkers has 1,000 total badges and 2 million points in JavaScript. Cool. So that method is working. So there's no errors. So let's remove this last line here and move forward. And you can close the console here as well. Cool. Now the next thing to do on the list is connect to a URL. It's time to look in the documentation. So let's go to node.js.org/API and let's navigate to the docs on the page and down to HTTP. Since we're accessing an HTTP site, the Treehouse API. There's this HTTP which we've looked at before, but below it there's HTTP GET. Let's click on that. And it's navigated us down the page to this example here. Okay, so in this example, it shows a web request that gets the index.html of google.com. Now, there's an important point here to be made. Remember when we saw the options before, it was a JSON object, but now it's a string here. I think in our code, we'll use a string. Talking of our own code, let's jump in and use this HTTP GET and see what our response looks like. So let's do var. I'm just going to give us some more space. Var request is equal to http.get, and we can copy this here and use it as a string and paste it there. I think what we're going to do is actually at the top of our file here, let's just have var username is equal to Chalkers. Feel free to put your username in there if you want. And in here, let's do plus username plus. Cool. And then we want to do a callback function. And what we want to do is all of these things here inside that callback. Once the response has been returned, so I'm going to pass in response here. Now, if you're confused on why I put response in there instead of res, that's because I prefer to use the full name of what the object is rather than the shortened versions of rec and res, just so it's a little more clearer. And I know that the response will come back because of these examples in the documentation here. So, and finally, let's do console.dir on the response. So we're going to inspect the response object in our code. So if we go to View and then Show Console, we can do Node app.js. And you see there's a problem, and it says on this line here, HTTP is not defined. That's because these APIs aren't available until we require them. So let's require the HTTP module using the require function. So I'm going to define it up here with my username is equals to require, and then the module name, which is HTTP. Now, I could call this anything I wanted to. It doesn't have to match the string of the module name, but it's sensible to actually call it by the module name so that you know what you're referring to in your code. So that seems sensible. And let's do show console again. Let's clear. And then node app.js. Now, doing console.dir may seem a little bit overkill, but sometimes it helps when debugging or seeing what's available to you if the documentation isn't forthcoming. In here, you can see lots of interesting things. It scrolls very quickly, but you can just barely do it. But it's got things like these HTTP headers here. So these are things that would be sent in the response. And there's also something like a status code. So I can do status. Oh, I can't find status code, but I'll be able to scroll to it. So you can see HTTP headers and the status code. So this is the status code here. For now, let's just log out the status code. So let's clear that out and do node app.js. And it's status code 200. That means it's okay. We've been able to connect to the URL.